Hello, and welcome back to Chasing Hazel's Tales, a family history podcast presented to you by two registered nurses and all-around family historians and sisters. If you've got family history, we want to talk about it. I'm Kim McLaughlin.
And I'm Laura Ireland. And today we're going to continue on with our discussion of the Burgoyne line. And we do have one little correction. That last week Kim mentioned a location in British Columbia that was named for a related Burgoyne. And it was not an island, as we had said, but it's called Burgoyne Bay. And it was named by a Captain Richards in 1859 after the Victoria Cross holder Hugh Talbot Burgoyne. And Burgoyne was serving on the HMS Ganges, the flagship of the Royal Navy's Pacific Station at the time, and Richards named many features during his survey after people or ships of the station. So, of course, Hugh was the only son of John Foxburgh and died at sea with no male heirs to continue the Burgoyne line on that level.
So we're not there. That's not us.
Nope, that ain't us.
It is reported in some places that it is us. It's not.
And we also, we should say there are no known male heirs or heirs of any kind.
Right. We can say that. And after
because we do know that things happen.
Right.
But it would be unknown and they wouldn't be named Burgoyne, I guess.
Right. That we're aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to continue on today is our theory that we're related to General Johnny Burgoyne of Revolutionary War fame or infamy, one or the other. And we chased this line because Sadie Burgoyne McConnell in the 50s had done a ton of research, and she created a family tree that showed that we're related to him. So we chased it.
Where's Henry Louis Gates Jr. when you need him?
Well, I called him. They're not answering my call.
They're not answering your call?
I tried. Well, and I even sent in for the Finding Your Roots thing.
Yeah.
I sent in for that too, but nobody's called. I don't know how.
Your phone's not ringing?
No, and I think that the contest is open until June, I think, or something.
Yeah, it was quite a while, so I know it's not over yet.
So you can do it if you want to. Maybe you'll have a better spin than I will, but maybe
who knows? Maybe you've been chosen and you just don't know yet.
That's true. My begging may have worked. Please help me. Anyway, so that's what we're doing, and we do it because Sadie said so. And she was a hard worker, and she has a lot of detail in all of her notes that I have looked at. So
right, and there's quite a bit of documentation to support her research.
Right up until a certain point.
Yeah.
But I don't see any of her sources, just that she wrote it. She found things, wrote it out. So I have no idea where she got any of this information, but I have been able to recreate a lot of it. So she's really worked really, really hard. So anyway, kudos to Sadie.
Yep.
And so things to remember for today when Laura and I are chatting is that there's a couple of things. Number one, birth dates. So when you go back in time, people were not as precise with birth dates. If you look on a census and they say, hey, he was 40 years old, he may have been 38, he may have been 35, and they just guessed to the nearest 5 years. Or whoever, if husband was out working and someone else was answering the census question, they might have got it wrong by a few years. It's not always a perfect science.
Right.
So
right.
Depending on what they told people, it wasn't important as it is now back then. So I always take the dates that I find of things with a grain of salt. And to that end, I say Sadie, some of the dates in her tree that she created push the boundaries of who can procreate. It's like, is he old enough to have children? I don't know. So it's just a thing. It's just, you have to take a lot of the ages with a grain of salt and find other ways to prove who's who. So that's one thing. And another thing for today is just to avoid confusion, because there's just so much in the Burgoyne line to talk about. I'm only going to be talking about the male line from General Johnny down, trying to connect it to our Cornwall Burgoynes. That's it. Just the males.
Okay.
Because I can't go into the other family members. I mean, they're fabulous, and I'm sure they all have really great stories, but
But I think for our purposes, that would be confusing.
It's very confusing.
We've got enough names and dates and times and places.
That's right. And we just need that. All I want is that male line just to prove that we are that Burgoyne line. But also, a lot of the information that I have used has come from the Cornwall Online Parish Clerks. And I just want to give them a shout out. And I'll put a link in show notes. But you can get all kinds of free information from their websites, the parish clerks. It's really amazing. They do a good job.
And are they helpful to you at, communicating through the computer? Did you have to go there to get any? I was all done by computer. Okay.
And there was a helpful person back in the 2000. It's been a while. It's been a long while, but that helped me look for some things. And we had great discussions over this stuff because she was in that area. And she knew how to get information, so she was helpful to me. She worked hard too. But
very nice.
So what we can confirm is that according to Sadie, Edward William Burgoyne was born in 1830 in Cornwall. He was the one who died in Prince Edward Island, and we all kind of funneled through him. Just to confirm, so he does show up in the 1841 census in Cornwall, this little Edward, and he was in a household. In the census, he was in the household of John Shear, Sheer, working as an agricultural laborer. And he was only 10 years old. He was in another household working the farm. But I did find this little we'll call him Little Edward because he was a child at the time. Little Edward, I found his mother and father also in the 1841 census. And they were in their regular household, and they were also agricultural laborers. So they were all working farms. And they are the family. It was so it was John, Little Edward, and his family. They emigrated to Canada, and so they emigrated. They showed up in Canada in 1843. So there's no use to looking at any records for us after that. So we start there.
Okay, and that makes him the great grandson, the one who traveled over.
John, the father of Little Edward, was the grandson of General Johnny.
Okay, so Edward William, who traveled over, is the great grandson.
Yes, correct.
Okay,
you are correct, and that's according to Sadie, and that's just another thing. But
right, that's all we can go on.
That's all we can. That's all I have to go on. Yeah. And so this father, John, who started his family in Cornwall, we find that he was potentially born around 1804 because he had his first child in 1825. He and his wife. Okay. Edward William was in 1830, but Little Edward had an older brother. So that kind of meshes. All right. So we have General Johnny and his second son, who was born in 1786. And then this John is supposedly the son of the second son. Does that make sense? It's sometimes easier for me because you don't have to say Edward John all the time.
Right. Well, and the other one didn't have any sons, so
right. So, but what I want to mention is that the timeline works out fairly well. So General Johnny was born in 1722. His second son, 1786. And so that works out because General Johnny was way older when he had children. So he was born in 1786, and that's been confirmed by birth certificate. And that's a happy circumstance because you had a rich family and they recorded it. St. Margaret's, Westminster. So we have Edward William, 1786, and then his son, John. And we can only kind of guess that he would have been born around 1804, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And so that timeline kind of works. And then we have Edward William. So John and Edward went to Prince Edward Island. So the thing is, we can't place General Johnny's second son in Cornwall because General Johnny's second son was supposed to have had a child in Cornwall in 1804. How did he get there? So the question is, so what I did was I tried to go the other way. I tried to find everything I could about the second son to figure out where did he go? What did he do? Did he end up in Cornwall connected to this family? because this family was born in Cornwall and then left for Prince Edward Island. So where is General Johnny's second son? Is he in Cornwall? I can't find him. I've looked. So some of the things that I've found is that I thought, well, I could just start looking around, and I've looked at death certificates, and they're really, really vague. They just say, John Burgoyne died age 25 or whatever, something like that. And it's just so vague. You can't tell if they're the right ones or not. So what I did was I thought, well, I'll start looking around. And these are the places that I've looked just to be able to find that second son to see if he went to Cornwall, because
this is the one who was how old was he? 6 years old when he went to Lancashire?
Right. He was just a child. Yep.
And then there's no real documentation after that.
No.
Right.
He disappears.
So he may be a wanderer.
Yep.
Maybe
he may have been
doesn't feel
seized.
tied to any one place,
Right. So that would, because he was young and maybe not so connected to his siblings, maybe he did.
Right. He was much younger, wasn't he?
Yep. So what I did was I thought, well, if he's a wanderer, or, what if I just look around in Lancashire to see if anybody knows anything? So I did, I hired a researcher, a genealogist in Lancashire, and he looked through all Lord Derby's papers in the university there, the local university, because that's where they held all of the, don't tell Andrew. So that's where they housed all of Lord Derby's papers. So I said, go in there and find out anything, maybe because, Lord Derby was supposed to pay for these children's education and well-being. So I thought, just look and see if if he went to college, did he buy a commission, in the military? Did he do anything? Did Lord Derby pay for any of this? Or does he mention him in the papers, like letters or something saying, hey, the kids are doing great, or something?
Was there any money given to the family to take care of these children?
I don't know.
Like, did General Johnny have any money when he died? And,
it's not,
would he have sent it along with his kids? Like,
yeah.
A good thing to do? But
it wasn't mentioned anywhere that I could find. But probably the resources are immense. I'm here on this side of the pond.
Yeah, we don't know.
So also, I ordered in books written by John Fox about his life, because he was quite famous and very well thought of in Great Britain. So I thought maybe, in his personal accounts, he may mention his brothers and sisters and things like that. Yeah. No, doesn't.
Nothing.
He does mention his kids or his wife or something, and that's great. That's okay. But he doesn't mention his brothers or sisters. And I looked at his sisters. He also had 2 sisters, and they married well and had successful families. Nothing, I could find nothing attached to them about their younger brother. But that doesn't mean it's not out there.
Right.
Also, I wrote to the current Lord Derby. I wrote him a letter. But guess what? He responded.
Really?
My question was, do you have a library there? It's called Knowsley Hall. Knowsley Hall is the seat of Lord Derby. And his name is Edward Stanley. And he has a nice family, and I guess. And I wrote and said, hey, listen, do you have any records there, or perhaps diaries or a library or anything? I said, this is what I'm looking for. And he was very, I just said, basically, I'm coming over. Can I look? I didn't
this
really
was
say
before
that,
your trip to England.
Yeah. But, just on a hunch, he might say, look, we have I was kind of hoping that he had a librarian that might do a lookup or something, but he didn't. He was very kind and said, geez, we don't keep those papers here. They're all kept somewhere else or whatever.
Was there a restraining order involved?
Yeah, it was attached to the restraining order.
A cease and desist.
Yeah. So anyway, so he said, no, we don't carry that kind of stuff here, but thank you.
That was nice of him. Yeah.
Very nice. And I just, I kept the letter. I said, well, at least he responded. But you can see what I did was I tried to ascertain what happened to this kid, the second son. And did he grow up, become of age, and wander on down to Cornwall? I can't find it. So that's this thing I'm stuck on. So are we related to General Johnny? Well, potentially potentially it's true. The dates kind of line up enough so
but
that
you just can't find
there's no link
no documents.
to say.
Yeah.
So we have our little Edward and his dad John, and John is supposedly the son of this second son.
Yeah.
And there's no mention anywhere, hey, General Johnny's my grandfather, cut me some slack or give me some land or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
makes me wonder if any of that information was lost as well, where the 6-year-old was sent to live maybe they just kind of dropped it from the family, the family story,
right?
The whole connection to the general after the death and moving to the new town. And
yep.
I don't know, just spitballing.
Yeah, spitballing, and there's I just can't connect the dots. Now there are quite a few Burgoynes in Cornwall.
Mm-hmm.
There is a family line there, and so many families, and so that is a seat of Burgoynes, but whether or not they're related to any of the ones up there, my whole journey has been to connect to the general, not necessarily to map out everything, but perhaps that will be where I have to go, because I just can't find it. So I'm looking for recommendations. Does that make sense? I mean, we just can't connect that second son ever went anywhere or even survived. Right. He could have died from cholera for all we know, or something, he could have, but what this story here on this podcast does is make me want to go back and start researching again, because there's so many resources that just keep adding and adding and adding. And I'm thinking I should probably just dive right back in and see what's new and see what new I can find, because there's got to be something about this somewhere. But there isn't. I can't find it. And this is where we are. So I cannot prove that, General Johnny is our direct ancestor.
So you need a leave of absence.
I need a yeah. And also I'd like to exhume General Johnny's body out of Westminster Abbey and get some DNA and see if we can't connect to someone, way that they did it with Richard III. Why can't they do it with General Johnny?
Yeah. But we'd have to connect. We'd have to ask some that
a male
are known.
Person. Yeah.
Right. It can't be our brother, because we know we're not genetically linked.
But I know those who are.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what I want to do, but I'm not going to, that's about as likely as getting on Finding Your Roots, I think.
So actually, this was a pretty good example. Maybe it's a very complex one, but a good example of all the different things you can try when you're trying to find some of these missing connections or documents or something.
When you're desperate.
You can write to Lord Derby and he'll let you know.
And he'll say, no, thank you. Yeah. He said there was no snarky. I sound snarky, but he was not at all. It was very businesslike and very, thank you so much for your interest. And we don't have any of that stuff. It's all at the university. So
did you save his letter?
Yes.
Now, was this actual mail or was it email?
No, actual mail. This is back before email.
Maybe we should put that on the show notes.
Yeah.
If you could find it. Do you know?
I've got it right here. Anyway.
All right.
Yeah, we hold on to that. So
but maybe we'll black out his address. So
yeah.
So the 5 people who look at it don't send him a letter.
So I know it's confusing, but I just can't make the connections solid. And I was telling you that I do have, when I went on to the Cornwall online parish clerks, there was someone who was helping me, and they developed a potential alternate line. And I think we'll go over that next week, because I can't do it this week. My brain will explode.
Yeah.
But the alternate line is very plausible. So
just briefly, that alternate line, does it stray from the Burgoyne line, or is it within the Burgoyne? Does it still make a Burgoyne connection?
It's all Burgoynes, but it's not General Johnny.
Oh,
so
okay.
So, but it's plausible. And until, and the thing was, this one has receipts. This one has actual registers and birth registers and marriages and wills and all those kinds of things that make it plausible. At least you can, it's on paper, you can see it. This line is probably more likely, but
and from all of the shows I watch, it's important to go where the evidence leads you,
right?
Not to pick your destination and then try to make the pieces fit.
Right. And that's what I'm doing with Sadie's line. There's a destination and I can't make it. I could make it fit if I could prove where the second son went.
Where that darn little son went.
That's right. Where is he? The little guy. So until that's answered, I can't say for sure.
Right. We can't. Yep.
And I have no idea, no sources from Sadie to say where she got that information. I have no idea.
Right, because it could be absolutely valid.
I mean, everything else that she's ever had has been valid. I have found to be true. So that's why it's like, I can't discount her work. She went to England. Maybe she talked to someone who knew stuff. I don't know, but she. Right,
because this was now, 70 years ago or so? Yeah. Holy cow, the 1950s were 70 years
that's
ago.
Long. Are you holding your forehead?
I am.
You get a headache all of a sudden.
Yeah. No, I think I need a nap. I feel old.
Okay. So next week we'll talk about the alternate line, just to maybe, or how about this? What if we just say, if anybody wants to know about the alternate line, let me know. And okay. I will send it to them, because I sent it to you, so you saw it. But it's a working document, just showing what we think is the other line, which we think is more likely. But until then, I'm still holding out that maybe Sadie's right, because can't prove she's not.
Right. Really can't prove. Yeah.
I'm just being respectful of her work, because she put a lot into it. And also on that note, so we talked about, I just want to do a little tidbit. We talked about the Burgoyne line before, and of course we have the past couple of weeks, but there's a family member who would be, so our Stan, it would be his uncle, Richard. Richard lived in the same town as Stan, and Richard was brother to Lewis.
Lewis, okay.
Right. So they were brothers. Richard was born 1860, North Granville, Prince Edward Island. And then he went to Vanceboro and then came to Howland, where he worked in the factory there. And it was called International Pulp and Paper Company, maybe. It changed hands. It used to be like a bag. They used to make paper bags there. It was right on the river in Howland. Yeah. So anyway, that's where he worked. So the weird story about this is, and this is what is written in the genealogy that I received in Stan's packet of information. So who wrote this? It may have been Sadie. I don't know. But it was all the compiled genealogy of all the Burgoynes. So it said that Richard, because he was born 1860, had a family, and I'm not going to go into those names, but he had a family, and this is what they said. And the reason I'm telling the story is because it's so interesting, the stories they tell, to protect some truths. And that's our thing, right, Laura?
There were so many truths protected.
That's right. And I'm totally cool with that. That's why I'm not going to use other names. I'm just, because they that was their thing. So
right. Yep.
This is what is written. Richard Burgoyne, after they did all of his details, disappeared on his daughter Susan's wedding day in 1903. So in Howland. And he's never been heard from since. Many and varied are the tales told and opinions given of his disappearance, but the one that seems most probable to me was the one my brother Lewis told me, and he was there at the time. It seems Uncle Dick had something to do with looking after the vats of acid at the mill with which the pulp chips were softened in. He gave his daughter away in marriage at the church. No one missed him until they were going back to the house for refreshments. At first, they thought he may have gone home, but when they arrived, he was not there, never been seen or heard from since that day. Lewis thought he may have slipped out from the church and gone to the mill to look at the vats, as he was very conscientious about his work, and somehow slipped or fell into one of the vats. And of course, in less than an instant, it would have been unable to get out. Lewis said he did not think of it at the time and was expecting him back any day. But in later years, when there was still no word from him, this was the theory he had regarding his disappearance, although one will never even know for sure. So after several years, there was a divorce filed for Richard. His wife had filed for divorce because they never heard from Richard again.
Huh,
So,
he gave his daughter away and then disappeared.
Right. This is exactly what's written
Mhm.
in the genealogy. And it says, so it does say here that my brother Lewis, so this must be Sadie, because Lewis was Sadie's brother.
As well as Richard's brother?
Richard would be one step
Her
back.
uncle? One step back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then the question, I mean, I found that kind of interesting. And I'm thinking, well, he fell in a vat of acid. Well, isn't that too bad? But then I get an email from someone in New York whose grandfather was Richard Burgoyne. And
did they share the same birth date?
Yeah. So this turns out that Richard had left, and they probably
hightailed it out of Howland. That's what he did.
Hightailed it out of Howland after he gave his daughter away and left and made another life in New York. And that was and so this connects back to a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about all the newspaper articles. So this Richard, his grandson or his son, because Richard who hightailed it, then died in 1903 and left his young family. Oh, it was after 1903.
Yeah, 1903 was the year his daughter got married.
Right, and so just a few years after that, he died. Just right, I mean, after he gets there, he gets a new family, he has a child, and then he dies. And that's why that child was a vagrant, remember? In the newspaper article, there was a vagrant that they picked off the street.
Yes.
And they said, oh, well, he's General Johnny's grandson, great-great-grandson. We'll take care of him. So that was a few episodes ago about that article. So this is the family. So then Richard, who has a new family, he dies, leaves them, of course, with no money, a young family.
Leaves two families with no money. Yep.
Right.
Okay, go on.
And then the reason that I'm telling this story is because my connection, our cousin who was in New York, we were talking about this, and it turns out that these children that were abandoned, so to speak, a lot of them ended up on the orphan train. And so the researcher in New York, who was a fabulous researcher, and I didn't ask permission to use her name, so I'm not gonna, but she, got me hooked onto this whole thing about orphan train. So any children who are orphaned like that would end up on an orphan train and head out west to find a family.
I read that book.
Yeah, so there is a book, and it's written by Christina Baker Klein, and it has a Maine connection. So the reason I bring this up is because I would never have known about the orphan train if it hadn't come this whole circle about the Burgoynes and connecting to New York, and then that researcher who also had connected about the families out there who had been placed on the orphan train. So what happens is if they're orphaned, they get shipped out west to a family to be adopted. And sometimes the adoption went well, and they were loved and all this, and other times they were just put to work. They were just
abused.
Abused, right. And so, but the book, it says Christina Baker Klein, and it says between 1854 and 1929, so-called orphan trains ran regularly from the cities of the East Coast to the farmlands of the Midwest, carrying thousands of abandoned children whose fates would be determined by pure luck. Would they be adopted by a kind and loving family, or would they face a childhood and adolescence of hard labor and servitude? So what this was about a young Irish immigrant, Vivian Daly, was that child sent from the rail from New York City to uncertain future, but she returned east later in life, and she led a quiet, peaceful existence on the coast of Maine. So this has a Maine connection. This has a Burgoyne connection because they told me about it. But if anybody's interested, The Orphan Train, the novel, is really well worth looking into. And it may be part of maybe your family tree, because maybe there were some orphans that got shipped out.
Hmm.
And I don't know, there was the Children's Aid Society. They were the people that were collecting these children, sending them out and thinking that they were doing good work.
Yeah. And the book was very, very interesting. I really loved reading it, but it can be a little bit difficult. They didn't go into too much detail, but, definitely some of these kids were not well treated where they went.
Right.
And it was even difficult managing them along the way because they didn't have a lot of resources.
Mm-hmm. And if you remember,
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I believe they didn't have the resources to care for them properly.
We've discussed other children's aid societies. Remember, you had a coworker who had a family member in England who was left orphaned and shipped, and they had well-meaning people, and these children in England would get shipped to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was a Commonwealth, and they would have their life here after they lost their parents. And not everybody, it was all just a flip of the coin. Do you get a good house or a bad house? And you just don't know, but they perhaps were well intended for the time. I don't know. Thought that they were doing good. Anyway, so that was what I wanted to say today, is you never know where what you'll learn, what piece of history is connected to you, and that's why you go looking.
And you might get surprised.
Yeah. So we get surprised every day.
Yeah. Surprised more than once. So we want to thank everyone for listening today. And if you wouldn't mind, just give us a rating, review, or follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We also invite you to reach out to us by email at chasinghazelsTales@gmail.com. Tell us your tales and share what you've learned or found interesting about your family, or if you have any questions that, maybe we can point you in the right direction for where you can get some more information. And of course, let us know if you have shaken your family tree and had any nuts fall out. We have our share, don't we, Kim?
I think I'm it.
I wasn't going to say that.
Tree yet.
She won't leave the tree.
We shake and we shake and we shake.
And you can also follow us or contact us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. And until next time, so long.
Goodbye.